Well, let me tell you one other thing about, well, actually, before I tell you one more thing about jobs, let me tell you the second problem that you have when it comes to economics. The biggest challenge that Black-owned businesses have in America is access to capital. Just how do you get the money to run the business? How do you get the money to expand the business? There are lots of Black-owned businesses that I've seen that would be doing much, much better, that will be able to create a ton of jobs for Black people if they could go to the bank and sign a document and get $250,000 in funding or $1 million in funding. Access to capital, aka debt or equity, whichever one it is extremely important for the growth of business. Elon Musk is the richest man on earth. Next to him is Bernard Arnault, who sells you Hennessy and Louis Vuitton and all this other stuff. These two men would not be the richest men on earth if they did not have access to capital. So if somebody says, well, what should Black people want? What's going to make the Black economic condition better? I need you to memorize these words. Type them in the chat for me. Access to capital. ATC. Access to capital. Access to capital. If you have access to capital, that means you have the ability to grow and scale your business, right? Because there's so many businesses, so many people that have great ideas, but they can't get the money to start the business. So many people have great businesses that are running, already making money, can't get a loan from the bank. Okay. This is why when you take that time to learn things like how to get your business credit score up, that's a good thing. When you take the time to learn how to form groups like investment clubs to build capital, that's a very good thing. Another thing, when you're doing things like the $5 a day investment plan for your kids, and making sure that by doing the $5 a day investment plan, which is at my website, it's at my site, boycewatkins.com. It's free. Pick it up. When you do that, you're giving your child access to capital. People in America who are free, they might be rich, but if you're not rich, you're still in a much better position if you have access to capital. If you are a struggling, broke person, if you ask me, let's say you said, hey, Dr. Boyce, which would you rather be? Would you rather be a guy who has, I don't know, let's say a $200,000 house, debt free, or be a guy who is able to borrow $10 million, but you have no assets? Which would you rather be? Oh, I'd rather be the guy who can borrow $10 million. Because if I can get access to $10 million, I can live like a rich person. You have no idea how many rich people there are who have years where they make less money than homeless people. Even the notorious Donald Trump made a good point with that. He told his son, he said, you see that homeless guy over there? And it was a year where they were having a bad year. They had lost $1 billion that year. He said, son, you see that homeless guy over there? And they're getting out of the limo. The guys opening the door for them. They got their long, warm coats, and the homeless person sitting over there freezing on the ground. He said, we have less money than that homeless person. He literally said, we have less money than a homeless person. Well, if you got less money than the homeless person, then how is it that Trump just landed on his own 747 jet and rode to the venue in a limousine where he's getting the door open for him by his driver to walk inside a luxury hotel? But you have less money than a homeless person. It's ATC, access to capital. Trump had access to capital. So your child may not be Donald Trump. Hopefully they'll never be Donald Trump, at least not in terms of personality. He's not a very nice guy. However, I want your children to have access to capital, because access to capital allows you to stay afloat even on a rainy day. Access to capital allows you access to a comfortable lifestyle, even when the cash flow ain't flowing quite the way you want it to. Access to capital allows you to kind of fake it till you make it. Access to capital allows you to grow and expand and take advantage of great opportunities. So capital becomes either an accelerator of your economic possibilities, allowing you to scale up and scale your business and all that, or it can just become a protector. Do you know how many businesses would die tomorrow if they didn't have access to capital? We're kind of going into a recession a little bit. Right now, employers, I just listened on NPR. They said employers are, it wasn't NPR, it's the Wall Street Journal. I listened to different sources. The Wall Street Journal said that employers right now are quietly firing employees like crazy. But they don't call them layoffs. What they do is, here's a little trick. They don't want to tell the employees that they're laying them off, because layoffs have a stigma attached. Layoffs make people mad. They come back and they sue you. Layoffs, they'll undermine the morale of the other workers, and they start getting nervous because now they're scared to death because they think they might be next, right? So you don't use the word layoff. What you do is you do things like you say, we're moving our office from Tacoma to Chicago. So if you want to keep your job, you've got to uproot your entire family and move to Chicago, and it might be for less pay. Well, then you say, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. I'm not moving all the way I got a life here. I'm not trying to move for this job. I showed them. I went and I put my application in and got a job somewhere else. Well, that's what they wanted you to do. They didn't want you anymore. It's like a bad relationship where you say, gosh, I don't want to break up with them because they're going to get mad at me. So I'm just going to be such a terrible boyfriend that she's going to walk away. And then I can say it's her fault. That's what they do. They don't want to break up with you. So this is what employers are doing right now, in case you're wondering what's happening in corporate America. And this is just one of many games that they play with you. Corporate America has, for over 200, 300, 400 years, played games with people. They play tremendous games with Black people. And your position in corporate America is even worse because these institutions are owned and controlled by others. And they're controlled by people who have a culture that's different from yours, that don't understand you, and they tolerate you so they don't want you there because of who you are. They'll allow you to be there despite who you are. So to some extent, when you don't have access to capital or some sort of economic base, you become almost like an orphan who's forced to live house to house. That's what you are. You become an orphan who's house to house because you don't have a base. You don't have where to live. I put something on my Instagram, and if you don't follow me on Instagram, feel free. My Instagram is The Real Boyce Watkins. If you go to my Instagram, The Real Boyce Watkins, you'll see this clip. I had to record it last night. Me and my wife were watching this show called 1923, and it's about this family called the Duttons, a white family in Montana, and they literally have seasons that feature this family's life 100 years ago or 120 years ago. They have one. So that show's called 1883. Then they have one called 1923. They have another one that they were developing called 1932. Another one called 1963. And then they have Yellowstone. Okay. So all these are Yellowstone spinoffs. All right. So here's what happened during that show. I was sitting there watching, and there was this guy who was a really wealthy guy, and he was talking to another guy. And the guy said, "Oh, I've got money. I'm rich." And he said, "Yeah, you have some money, but you're not really rich." He said, generational wealth is the closest thing that you can have to more immortality. He said, when you're rich and you have generational wealth and you know your name is on a building, he said, that's basically when you have an extraordinary and unbelievable amount of power and you get to live forever. And so ultimately, and he said it a different way. He didn't say, he said it in a much more eloquent way than I did. And I think you should watch this clip because it really captured the essence. He used the term generational wealth many times. And I got excited because I always talk to you guys about generational wealth. Fred Jackson says he saw it. Yeah, it was very powerful. It was coming from a white guy, but I really just want you to forget about what race he is. And I want you to hear what he said. And so what I really want you to embrace is that power, that immortality that does come with the building of generational wealth. That's how you get to live forever. And then the other piece of it is that when you embrace that idea, then it puts your children in a position where they're not in the corporate rat race. They're not part of the plantation. They're not getting body slammed economically by these corporations who don't really care a whole lot about human beings. Workers' wages have been going down. Even during inflationary periods, when inflation's going up and the cost of goods are going up, that stuff is going down. Houses are going up in price. Groceries are going up in price. Rent is going up in price. Corporations are starting to buy a lot of houses now and pushing the rent up. They're buying houses so they can rent them out. So the economy is not built for people to thrive as workers. At best, you're going to survive. And in fact, right now, a big conversation has to do with student loan debt. The Supreme Court right now is making a decision regarding whether or not Joe Biden has the authority to eliminate or forgive student loan debt. Now they're giving up. I think they're eliminating like $10,000 for each person if it goes through. 10,000, it could be a lot of money for you. Most people I know, they owe a whole lot more than 10,000. I know people that owe $400,000 of student loan debt, 200,000, 300,000, whatever. So here's what's interesting about that. Two things. Number one, student loan debt is not legitimate debt to begin with, because what happened was that because so much debt was available, the inflation rate, like whatever the regular inflation rate was at the grocery store or for your rent or for gas, student loan or tuition inflation was about 5 times that amount. They were literally raising the cost of tuition at a rate that was several times higher than the cost of goods in general. So they were jacking up the cost of tuition. Why? Well, because they said, look, people are short-sighted. An 18-year-old is going to gladly sign this document, signing his life away so he can get this college degree. It was the scam of the century. It was the crime of the century. They were robber barons on the entire country because what they did was they said they had something in economics that we call, what do they call, what's the term? An inelastic commodity. An inelastic commodity is a commodity that you have to have. You know, even more than Beyonce tickets. You ever see somebody, spend their rent money to go to Beyonce concert or whatever, right? Like it's even bigger than a Beyonce concert, or like getting Air Jordans for a 17-year-old. They'll do anything to get a pair of Air Jordans, right? So this inelastic commodity, or a drug addict looking for crack, right? You can increase the price of crack by 30%, and the addicts will still show up. So they have this inelastic commodity that everybody felt like they needed. It was this thing called a college degree. So because they knew everybody needed one and there was limited supply theoretically of the number that they could give out, they knew they could charge whatever they wanted and they would still sell out every single year. So they continued to push the prices up, which led to the debt spiraling out of control. So on one hand, the government's like, oh, we're here to help you. We're going to loan you as much money as you need to go to school because school's important. But that becomes a problem if you're not controlling the cost of tuition. So the cost of tuition, the amount of debt they made available only matched the cost that they were charging you. So it's like if you say, gosh, I'm hungry, I want a sandwich, and let's say that you say, I've only got $5 in my pocket and the sandwich costs $8. I can't afford it. And someone says, don't worry, I'll loan you up to $50 to get a sandwich. And the sandwich supply company or the sandwich seller is sitting there watching this happen. They're like, oh, so now I can charge $40 for a sandwich because now you can borrow $40 to get the sandwich because I know you got to eat, right? So here's the other thing that's interesting about student loans is that you may or may not know this, but Joe Biden is the reason for the student loan debt crisis. Do y'all know that? Like he's the person that specifically, it was him and Bill Clinton working together, but they pushed through the legislation that disallowed people from declaring bankruptcy on their student loans. So if you're saddled with student loan debt, there was a time, I don't know how many other people have been hit with student loan debt. Let me know if you have. But if you're saddled with student loan debt, think about this. If you have more other kinds of debt, you can just go to a lawyer, a bankruptcy lawyer, and you can write it off. You can just say, I declare bankruptcy. My credit it'll be on my credit report for 10 years, whatever. Who cares? Right? And you just live with it, right? They said, no, there's no escape. We're going to put you in this financial jail cell, and we're going to lock you in, and we're going to make sure that you don't have access to a key. You have no escape. So you must repay us. That's gangster. Like that is extortion. That is literally like a mob boss coming and knocking at your door and saying, we have your child. If you don't pay us the money you owe us, we're going to take your child. Right. So ultimately, this is what's happening here. And the last point I'll make on this in terms of quarantining yourself and quarantining your children from these various economic disasters that are laid out in front of them, you have to be really careful about student loan debt. I'm not telling you not to go to college or send your kid to college. Me and my wife, we're sending all our kids to college. So college is okay. College can serve a purpose. But if they're not ready, if they're going to go waste your time and not really actually learn anything meaningful, then don't do it. Send them to a state school or something where the tuition is lower. And at a state school, they can learn just as much as they can in a lot of private schools. The other piece is that whatever they major in, they should major in something that's going to lead to economic possibilities that allow them to repay the debt that they have. And then thirdly, every black child needs to know how to start their own business. Every black child needs to know how to invest. Every black child needs to know how to make money in a way that doesn't just involve filling out a job application. If you fill out a job application and that's the only thing you can do, then you will be stuck in this economic purgatory that they put all the workers in, where because you got so much debt, you have to go to work. Because why? Well, because you have no inheritance, you have no assets, you have nothing else, no economic cushion to lean on, and so you're going and you're paying rent to your landlord, and you're working every day just so you can make enough money to pay the landlord. So you're kind of working. It's like like you're really kind of like this economic prostitute, and they're kind of passing you, or they're all using you, right? So you're going to work extra hard to pay back the student loans, to pay the landlord, to go buy stuff at the mall, right? And then you deplete yourself of all your money, and then you got to go back to work again. That's this perpetual hell that they get you trapped into. The only way you can escape is if you understand how this hell works and you understand where the exit doors exist. But even more importantly, you can build the exit door for your child 20 years in advance. Literally. Again, BoyceWatkins.com. Go the $5 a day investment plan. It's free. If you follow that strategy, all you got to do, two things. All you got to do, set your app to automatically invest in some sort of S&P 500 index fund. VOO, that's the Vanguard fund. They got others. SPY, that's another one. That's another ticker symbol. VOO, SPY. Invest at least $35 a week in that fund. Do not sell those stocks. Do not sell, do not sell, do not sell. One thing rich people do is they do not sell their stuff unless they have to. Do not sell. And if you can afford more than $35 a week, which is about $140 a month, if you can afford more than that, then do more than that, right? If you're spending $500-600 a month on your car note, then I would hope that you would spend $500-600 a month for your kids. Your kids should matter more than your car note. The ticker symbols are VOO and SPY. There's others. Literally, there's a million ways to do this, but I like to try to keep it simple because I want to try to get a million people to do this. This will change the whole game, because then your child hits 25, 30 years old. They've got a couple $100,000 in liquid assets, and they understand the game. They understand the system. They're not going to fall into the trap. Their friends will, because their friends' parents aren't thinking about this. Their friends' parents are living 2023, and they're not thinking about 2043. Nobody's thinking about 2043. So we're doing an invasion. We're doing an invasion. I need you to be in the army. We're invading a territory. What territory are we invading? We're invading the future. We're invading the year 2043, meaning that we're going to spend 2023 thinking about 2043, because wealth builders have vision of things that are not yet here, vision of things that may seem impossible, vision of things that are going to happen in the future. So we're going to invade 2043. We're going to get there mentally and go ahead and start preparing so that when 2043 hits 20 years from now, when your 2-year-old is then a 22-year-old, your 12-year-old is a 32-year-old, they're in a strong economic position because somebody made a plan for them. Wealth builders always have a plan. Make sure you have a plan. That's a very basic plan. It's very easy to implement. And I put $35 a week as a bare minimum. But if you got it like that, then I say 10x that if you can. If you can afford to 10x that, 5x that, then your kids are going to be extremely wealthy. But do not sell those assets. That belongs to your kids. All right. So let me move forward. Let me start reading here. One of y'all asked a question. Do you get training hours or certification for the Black Wealth Bootcamp in Los Angeles? You know what, Jazz? We didn't actually set up a certification program for the bootcamp in LA, but we that's a good idea. So I think Chanel's actually here. Chanel, can you bring that up in our meeting? See if we can get some certificates that we can print up. We're going to be in Los Angeles March 10th. So if you want to join us for the Black Wealth Bootcamp, it's 2 days of deep dive wealth training coming from my new book. My book is called The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power. You can get a copy on Amazon or my website. And we're going to go through this book in detail, and I'm going to break down each of the 10 commandments, explain how they all work together and how to implement them in a way that will be effective. Okay, so feel free to join us in LA. You can go to my website and find out more information, BoyceWatkins.com. All right, so let me read this. There are 3 primary sources of large amounts of capital. This is Powernomics, page 149, powernomics.com. That's where Dr. Anderson's books are. There are 3 primary sources of large amounts of capital: public markets, traditional financial institutions, and private markets. Public stock offerings provide corporate financing. through open solicitation to the public at large. So that's where a bunch of people buy one share, buy a few shares of a company, and then next thing you know, you've got a few $1 billion. However, corporate public offerings must be approved and regulated by the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission. This is a very important source of equity funds, but it is expensive, technical, and time-consuming. Most Black Americans are much more familiar with institutional lenders such as banks, credit unions, and community development corporations. All of these sources should be explored in seeking debt and equity for entrepreneurial projects. It is a statistical pattern, however, that a high proportion of Black borrowers are denied loans. To borrow capital from a traditional lender, a borrower must already have capital. See, that's where your kid gets ahead, right? Because you're building the capital base now. To build wealth, it's hard to build wealth without time. So by preparing for 2043 or 2053 now, you're using time to your advantage. All of you can be rich with time, or all of your families can be wealthy with time. So that's why we're invading 2043 and 2053. I'm not worried so much about 2023, to be honest with you. So let's keep going. All of these sources should be explored in seeking debt and equity for entrepreneurial projects. Let's see here. To borrow capital from a traditional lender, a borrower must already have capital, collateral, or guarantors. Equity funds are scarce. So she's saying that you have to have capital already, you have to have collateral, or you have to have guarantors. So typically banks loan money to people who are already rich. They loan money most likely to people who don't really need the money. That's your biggest challenge, right? Equity funds are scarce. Just like wealth begots wealth, poverty begets poverty. Blacks must organize and operate their own banks, credit unions, CDC savings and loans, venture capital firms, and investment clubs. Where they already exist, support them and demand that if they are in your neighborhood, they support your Powernomics community building efforts. So I would encourage you. There's a training I have in the Black Business School called How to Form a Family Investment Club, or How to Form an Investment Club that operates like a family bank. Feel free to go take a look at that, because investment clubs are a great way for you to pool your resources together, but not just your money. I said resources, not pool your money. Money is part of it, but also you remember, when you're getting together, you're not just pulling together your money. You're pulling together your ideas. You're pulling together your networks, right? You're bringing together mutual support. So there's a lot that's being pulled together. Then your families are coming together, right? So there's a lot more that's coming together than just the money. Reparations is outside the traditional sources of capital, but it is a bill that is owed to Black people, and one that we must present to the nation for payment. Reparations for Black people is no longer a far-fetched issue for parlor room discussions. It is now a necessity. Making restitution for damages is rooted in our legal system and has been used by industrialized nations as a mechanism to apologize for and correct institutional wrongs. Reparations payments for centuries of slavery and Jim Crow semi-slavery can take many forms. Government or private corporations can make restitution through such efforts as cash payments, land grants, and educational scholarships, tax-exempt status, and free healthcare. Cash payments should go into regional development banks from which Black Americans could draw down equity capital for business investments. These banks should be established specifically to allocate those funds as vision capital for Blacks. Funds should be used only for projects that promote the Powernomics vision of a self-sufficient and competitive Black America. So there we go. So when the politicians come around, and as they always do, and they start saying, weird things to me like no voting, no vucking. I don't know if y'all saw that, but they had that stupid video that came out. All I just say is, well, no reparations, no vote. So when you say no voting, no vucking, I'm going to say, well, no reparations, no vote. Right. So basically, politics, in my view, and Dr. Anderson's view, has to be a quid pro quo. Whatever you vote for, I encourage you to ask yourself, what am I getting for this vote? If I'm not getting what I want from this vote, then I'm not going to give my vote. That's the only language that they respect. All right, so let me keep going. Economic action step number 12, Powernomics, page 150. Dr. Claude Anderson's website is powernomics.com. I hope you will go and support him in every way that you can. He deserves our support. Number 12, establish international economic alliances and marketing agreements between Black America, Black Africa, and Caribbean nations. So here he says that while building its own competitive yet complementary economic structure, Black America should also play the lead role in constructing international economic alliances and marketing arrangements between the sub-Saharan African countries, the Caribbean, and the nation of Brazil. Collectively, those nations and Black Americans as a nation within a nation have a total human population of nearly 1 billion people. Yet these billion people are all economically marginalized. They are forgotten people living in the shadows of all other human groupings as a third world of third world nations. Now, let me just say this. I speak to people like Dr. Ken Harris out of Detroit, who is a great black man that I respect and admire deeply. Also, I talked to Dr. George C. Frazier and a few others, Michael Roberts and some other people. And one of the things that they are doing, which I support completely, is they are doing delegations over to the continent of Africa to form trade relationships where business can be done. This is going to take time, right? And one of the things that I think you could do to prepare the next generation, remember, we're invading the year 2043. We're not worried about 2023 or 2024 or 2025. We're going to invade 2043. So one of the ways we can invade 2043 is I would encourage you to consider exposing your children to cultures outside of the United States so they can get comfortable. It might mean letting them learn a foreign language of a country that you want them to do business in. It might mean saving up some money so you can take them on a trip. Expose them to things, because I don't know about you. How many of you like kind of grew up where you felt like you were overly Americanized? Like all you knew about was the United States and you didn't learn about other countries. You didn't, I know as a kid, I was, going to another country was not even something I could even put in my vocabulary. I couldn't even imagine going to another country when I was a kid. We went to Disneyland like one time when I was 14. Like that was the biggest trip we ever took. So here's the thing. If you expose your kids to that stuff early, then they're going to have a comfort level with going to these other places and blending in and doing business, as opposed to them trying to figure it all out when they're 45 years old. So I would encourage you to expose your kids to different cultures, get them that foreign language class or whatever. Like we got to educate our kids to prepare them, because another thing about pimping, here's another thing about pimping. And I use that term because this is what it is. One thing about the pimping of black people that comes through the way we are institutionalized at an early age is a good pimp will make you think that you have no other options, right? A good pimp will not that, but I mean good as an effective, not good as in a good person, right? Pimps are obviously bad people, but an effective pimp limits your options, right? So if I want to pimp you and I want you to be trapped, then not only am I going to put you in a position where all you know how to do is come work for me, right? You can't start a business. You don't know how to invest. You ain't got no, I'm going to put you in a position where you ain't got no resources, right? Abusive men do this to their wives. If they want to control their wives or something, they'll say, hey, babe, why don't we move away from your family? I don't want you living near your family. What are they doing? Well, they're taking you away from your support base. They're taking you away from the people that are going to come and protect you if he decides to punch you in the face, right? So they'll take away your options. But they take you away from your support base. They keep your self-esteem low, and they say stuff like, well, if I don't want you, nobody will, right? Anybody ever heard stuff like that, right? Well, in America, I think that that's what happens to black people. I think that we get to the point where we think that America is all that there is. And then you ask them, you go to school and you talk to this white lady from the suburbs. You're in one of these crappy Chicago public schools, and you got little geniuses in these schools, right? Kids with IQs that are through the roof, right? But instead they're using their IQs to learn how to twerk and rap, right? And play basketball, but they could be using their IQs to do anything. So they ask questions like, so what about Africa? How come y'all didn't talk about Africa? And you know what they do? Then they start giving the white representation of Africa. They start talking about Africa in such a way that you then have some of these kids growing up saying, woof, I'm so glad they took me out of Africa. I wouldn't want to live there ever, right? I have seen kids who have African parents and grandparents who are so Americanized that they had no interest in going to Africa, but they love Europe. They want to go to Europe because Europe is romanticized, right? And so ultimately what I would encourage you to do is don't let that happen to your kids. Like help them understand that the world is their stage. The world is their theater. Open-mindedness. My brother did something that I thought was really great. Him and his wife, when they got married, they went to live in 25 different cities, and they would live in each city for about 3 weeks. And then they moved to another one. And then they lived there for about 3 weeks, and they moved to another one. This is before they started having kids and stuff. Having kids is a little bit tougher. I think you can still do it with kids because then your kids are getting exposure or whatever, but it is tougher, right? Because your kids have to socialize and all that, right? So it's up to the parents to decide how to manage that. But ultimately, I encourage you to be as open-minded as you can possibly be and pass that to your kids, because as I go through life, I'm learning more and more that there are so many things that we just don't do because we're just scared. And if you ever want to be in a prison, if you ever want to live in a prison your whole entire life, live your life based on fear. Like, just make all your decisions based on what you're afraid of, and you will literally be in in the worst kind of the only you've been the kind of prison that was literally created by the devil. It will be the worst prison you can ever imagine. So if you ever want to be free, I would argue that the first thing you have to learn how to fight is your fear, right? And then also training your children to get over that fear, right? So that's just my 2 cents. That's what I believe. All right, so let me keep going. All right, let's see here. So there's a table here. Dr. Anderson calls it Table 5. He says, as indicated on Table 5, which is on page 152 of Powernomics, he says Black people are at the bottom of the barrel. So what he has here is he has per capita domestic gross domestic product, and he has Switzerland at 36,300, Sweden at 36,200, Japan at 29,000. At the very bottom of this list is Nigeria at $278. Then he goes into the number of engineers and scientists per million people in the population. Japan has the highest with 3,500 engineers or scientists per million people. The U.S. is second with 2,600. Europe is third with 1,600. At the bottom is he has Africa at 53 and Burundi at 43. World distribution of wealth per country of capita. Australia's distribution of wealth per capita is 835,000. Canada is 704,000. The U.S. is 421,000. Black Africa is negative $1,000. So this is according to Table 5 in the book Powernomics. All right. So he says that the combined legacies of slavery and colonialization left them severely impoverished, politically unstable, and ethnically conflicted to the point that they are vulnerable to and cannot respond to common disasters. Famine, they can't respond to famine, disease, and the ravages of poverty. Within the next decade, the greater question will be whether or not these poor Black nations can compete, but whether or not they will even physically survive. He says also that Black African countries, just like many other third world nations, tried a variety of tactics to break free of the first and second world domination. Some tried nationalizing Western companies and land rights, setting up commodity and exporting cartels, subsidizing indigenous manufacturing to achieve import substitution, or campaigning for a new world order based upon redistribution of the existing imbalances of wealth. None of these tactics have worked to the degree that these Black countries could industrialize and move out of the third world category. They failed not because the ideas were bad, but because of opposition from leading industrial democracies, the have nations. So every time African countries tried to elevate, according to Dr. Anderson, it was always the industrialized countries, aka the European nations, that got in the way of them sort of advancing or claiming their own stake in their own political destiny. So he says the leading industrial democracies protect their vested interests from competition from third world and developing nations. The first and second world countries have all the trump cards. They use a variety of institutional devices to keep the smaller nations non-competitive and outside of major commercial markets. As indicated below, in a global comparison of wealth and technically trained people within nations, there are grotesque disparities between Black nations and the rest of the world. The wealth and education gap between Black and non-Black countries is too great for them to catch up and compete on their own. Global success of Black people is contingent upon many ifs. If Black America can build functional business communities with industries, if it can establish its own source of economic funding, if it can link up a national network of Black consumer markets, and most importantly, if it can become the economic and political capital for diasporan Blacks around the world. If all those ifs can be managed, all the Black people of the world will be in a better position to ally with America's Blacks and begin to work together to resolve our institutional dilemma. Only Black Americans are in a position to lead the world's Black population. They have the advantage of being within the United States. There are more skilled and highly trained Blacks here than any other major Black population on earth. But by every measure of wealth and human capital, Blacks everywhere in the world are on the bottom. Therefore, we must be on a mission and come together in an alliance for strength. Black African nations are so far beneath white and Asian nations that their statistics are in the negative column. The wealth gap is so great that it is a miracle that Black Africa can survive, let alone compete. Only a glance at the maldistribution of wealth disparity in the world should point out the magnitude of the dilemma, as well as the impact of 500 years of slavery that denied them the opportunity to own and control wealth-producing resources. The burden of redistributing wealth will fall upon the shoulders of a black economy to save itself and aid African nations. So he's saying that, you know, you're an important part of the resurrection of black people around the world. And it's kind of true. I mean, we're already leading the world in a lot of other areas. You know, you go to other countries, they know all about our rappers and actors and entertainers and everything else, right? They know about the NBA and NFL players. I think that by ownership of black media that's reaching the world, I think that we then have the ability for them to be exposed to our brilliant black scientists, our brilliant black attorneys, our brilliant black medical doctors, our brilliant black scholars in a multitude of areas. When I go to other countries, I get greeted very, very well. I went to Black London and I got treated so well. We had an event in London. It was sold out, hundreds and hundreds of people, and I felt so bad because I didn't know that I had so much support in London. So people look to the black community in America for leadership, right? And also I think that we can reciprocate by at least having a consciousness of what's happening in the world and realize that the world is bigger than Detroit. The world is bigger than just what's happening in Chicago or Atlanta or New York. We have a whole community around the globe that has our back. And one thing that they have that we don't necessarily have all the time is if you look at, for example, Nigeria, some other places, they kind of have their self-esteem intact. Or Jamaicans. I'm talking about our Jamaican friends that really get it. I mean, some people don't get it. We know that, right? But the ones that do, some of the smartest students I knew in graduate school were from Jamaica, right? So you got some places around the world where we can learn a few things. I think that if you haven't traveled the world and gone to some places where black people are the majority, where you know what it's like, where the first thing somebody notices about you isn't the color of your skin, that's very empowering. So I encourage you to go have that experience so that you can make sure you share that with your kids. Okay? Because the problem I find is that when we're always kind of surrounded or we're always stuck in these spaces with people that, that don't like us so much, we spend a lot of time giving a lot of our attention to white people, right? We spend a lot of time worrying about what white people think about us, trying to prove things to white people, trying to get into spaces with white people, trying to Jackie Robinson our way into places where we're not wanted. And this isn't always our fault, right? This is what is promoted in the media, right? Where it's promoted. Jackie Robinson and him abandoning the Negro Leagues, that is celebrated. It's like, yeah, that's great. Why would you want to hang out with a bunch of black people when you could go be around white people who will spit on you, right? So that right there is a psychological issue. That's a self-esteem problem. And I would encourage you to make sure your kids don't have that problem because it's cost us everything. When I went to Daytona 500, had a really good time. And it was really interesting. I really became intrigued with the whole racing, NASCAR. And I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And everybody's making a big deal about Bubba Wallace and the black drivers, and we need more black drivers and all that. And then I found out that there was a whole black racing league called the Golden Glory Sweepstakes in the early 20th century. The Golden Glory Sweepstakes was better than NASCAR. The Golden Glory Sweepstakes had the best black race car drivers on the planet. The Golden Glory Sweepstakes, they were people that were as fast or faster than the Indy 500 drivers. And it was ours. We owned the whole entire league. We weren't trying to get a little piece of the league or trying to get one little opportunity. We controlled the opportunities. We decided who would get the opportunities. So I encourage you to really teach your kids to kind of think bigger. Instead of trying to break into someone else's space, teach them how to create their own space. Right. And here's the other thing. Another thing you can do, another little trick you can do to really help your kids understand this is every month or so, or maybe every week if you want, have them read the origin of some major corporation in America. Like if it's Disney, have them read about Walt Disney and how he was just a little scrub who got fired from his job, who decided to start his own business. And that next thing you know, you got the Disney Corporation. Have them read about how UPS is a $250 million company that was started by two teenagers who were delivering packages on their bikes. Two little scrubs, two little kids just riding bikes, delivering packages. Next thing you know, that becomes UPS. Teach them about how McDonald's was started by the McDonald's brothers who figured out a really efficient way to serve hamburgers in their little restaurant. And then they ran into Ray Kroc, who took that idea and had the vision to scale it so that it goes all around the world. These sorts of visions are what create massive, powerful institutions. So what happens is that if you are a smart person who thinks small, then what's going to happen is you're going to do a lot of small things really well. Everything you do is going to be tiny and microscopic. It's like the best. Imagine if you have the best singer in the world. Who's your favorite singer? Think of who the singer. Is it? Do you love? Is it Beyonce? Is it Lauryn Hill? Is it? Is it Rihanna? Is it Patti LaBelle or Aretha? Like, imagine if every time Aretha, name your favorite singer. Put your favorite singer here. Anita Baker. I'm gonna say Anita Baker. Imagine if for her whole entire life. Imagine if every time Anita sang, she sang like this. She would only whisper when she was singing, but she was singing like the best song ever. But she was always whispering, and nobody could hear what she was saying. Imagine that, right? That's what happens when you are a smart person who doesn't know how to think big, who's afraid to try something new, who's afraid to challenge themselves, who's afraid to develop scale and infrastructure, who's never been exposed to that. What's going to happen is you're going to do a lot of really great things, really small, and somebody who thinks big is going to take your great ideas, make it part of their vision, and they're going to get all the money. So ultimately what I would encourage you to do is, as you're raising your kids, teach them how to think big. Teach them how to study, like have them study some of these major corporations and the origins and where they came from, so that they can say, oh, I get it. Okay, so Silicon Valley was created by a guy who got together, an engineer who was sick of his job, who got together with some of his homeboy engineers who were also good at their jobs, but who also wanted to quit. And 7 of them sat down and signed a napkin and made a plan to go out and buy this land in this orange grove, in this place that would become Silicon Valley, this land that nobody wanted, their own, like a white version of Black Wall Street, where they went out there and set up shop. Next thing you know, Silicon Valley produces a large percentage of all the wealth created on the entire earth. I think there was a point where 1/3 of all wealth created on the planet was created in Silicon Valley. If you go back 60 years ago, nobody even lived there. So why would you want to go there? There's nothing there, right? So can you find a place where there's nothing there right now, and then have enough vision and enough commitment to say, okay, if I pour into this, then I can make it into something great. And that's hard to do, because sometimes you'll invest in things that don't pan out. Sometimes you'll try to create something amazing and it doesn't become amazing, right? But if 1 million people all get up with the vision and the commitment to create something great, statistically speaking, a few thousand millionaires and billionaires will come out of that group. Okay, so ultimately, when we're talking about invading the year 2043 and invading the year 2053, we have to have 1 million kids who are just headed for the gold rush. The gold rush of saying, you know what, my mom and daddy got me good. They got me exposed to some Dr. Boyce ideas and some other ideas that are really going to empower me. I'm not going to dedicate my life to chasing jobs. I've got a little bit of wealth in my back. I'm 25, 30 years old. I got $250,000 in stock that my father and my mother left me when I was a baby. So now I can go out and explore and create amazing things with my friends. I can get together with my homeboys. We all went to college together. We're all super smart. We're all super hardworking. And now we're all working hard together to create this business. And this business grows into a multi-billion-dollar entity. That's what white guys do all the time. Not all the white guys do it, only the special ones, right? So not every black person is going to achieve this. Not every black person is going to succeed at this, only the special ones. But here's your problem. You have a lot of very special children who are stuck in systems that are designed to zap them of their specialness. Do you understand what I'm saying? You got do you know how many geniuses that there probably are? I'm talking about IQs higher than Einstein, who probably attend one of those 55 schools in Chicago where there's not one child who reads above grade level. So there are entire systems designed to suppress your greatness and suppress everything that you're supposed to do, suppress God's plan for you, right? So you got to get around that. And so I don't trust any of these systems. I don't like the media. That's why I walked away from the media. I used to do media. It took me time to figure that out. I used to do media a lot. Like if you go back to around 2011, 2012, 2010, I was doing a lot of mainstream media. I stopped doing that. I said, this is stupid. This is propaganda. This is crazy. Educational system. I went through the system. I learned what I needed to learn, but then I realized, oh no, this is not a place that's going to help me actually become my best self. This is not a place designed to create the version of Boyce that's going to be the best version he can possibly be, right? This is a dish that has to be custom made. This can't be made through a system or a factory. This has to be made with special ingredients and in special circumstances in a special environment. So I had to go create my own environment, my own space, right? So this is what I'm noticing. This is what I hope you'll consider, because if we keep committing to these systems, then other people will win. We're gonna lose, and you're not just losing because you're black. Like, being black is kind of like a bonus. That just creates extra suffering, right? That, because they know they can do it to you easier than everyone else. But America in general, when it comes to the way capitalism is executed in this country, when it comes to just the severe incompetence of your politicians, millions of people are being suppressed in the same way. It's just that when you're black, though, we're the only community where the vast majority of us are oppressed in that way, right? But there are millions of white people who get up every day and go into the corporate plantation and are struggling and stressed out and worried because they don't have any assets, don't have wealth, can't get the car fixed if it breaks down. Most people are not ready for retirement. It's a mess, and it's going to get messier. So I want you to make sure your kids are prepared for the future. All right, so let's keep going. All right, so let's see here. Dr. Anderson says, blacks dispersed around the world must unify across geopolitical boundaries and forge economic alliances that allow them to collectively share and control resources, exploit mutual trade opportunities, and compete in global markets. And an economic alliance must have four elements. Okay, so pay attention. It must have four elements. One, surplus capital. Two, middle class skills and professional training. You got that. And you got surplus capital, because that's that 1.6 trillion that you give away every year to white people. That's your surplus capital. And you got human capital and intellectual capital, and you got relationship capital, networking capital, all that, right? So surplus capital, middle class skills and professional training. Three, control over technology. You may not control over technology and raw resources, so you don't have as much control over technology and raw resources as we should. So that's something to think about. And then four, access to political power. You do have political power. We're just trained to give it away to other people, right? So I would encourage us to harness that. Black Americans are an advantaged group. They have three of the four required elements for an alliance. Even though their group position is less than other non-Black Americans, Blacks have some surplus capital, an educated and skilled professional middle class, and are politically situated within the most wealthy and powerful nation on earth. Wow, that's crazy. Every time it's weird. I didn't know Dr. Anderson was going to say this in the next sentence, but I literally just said that. That's why he's like a father to me, because we just think alike, and I just love this man. Without him, there is no me. I owe everything to his greatness. So let me just make that clear. They have been marginalized in America by being denied ownership of and control of resources, but they can now play a lead role in an economic alliance that can lift all Black nations. If Black Americans could arrange to link the Black vertical industries and businesses in this country with the raw materials that come out of Africa, Brazil, and the Caribbean, and the 1 billion Black consumers across the world, the alliance would be powerful. No one nation has everything that is needed to become self-sufficient, but we all have something we can bring to make that delicious stew we spoke of earlier that we can sell to benefit everybody. So he's saying that what your role is that you can bring vertical industries and businesses in this country and link it with the raw materials in Africa, in Brazil, and other places. That's what Dr. Anderson is saying. He says the low productivity in Black nations is traceable in major part to the fact that all of the major population groups have economic alliances. The exception is Black people in Africa, America, Brazil, and the Caribbean. By grouping our wealth and financial markets, we begin to compete for economic power. The European whites have a European common market. The Asians have the Asian Pacific Rim Economic Alliance. The Hispanics and non-Hispanic whites have the North American Free Trade Agreement. For maximum political and economic clout, Black America should practice Black nationalism as discussed in Chapter 3 and link their various populations and resources around the world. Through vertical integration and ethno-aggregation, Black Americans can exercise greater control over our capital, productivity, and markets. That's a lot. And remember, when Dr. Anderson talks about the Asian Pacific Rim Economic Alliance, the North American Free Trade Agreement, what he's talking about is something that we've discussed here, which is that most economic power is warfare and it's gang affiliated. In war, the teams that win, the countries that win are the ones that have the biggest armies. So in economic warfare, your army the power of an army is a function of not just how many soldiers you have, but what kind of weapons they have. So if you have a lot of a large consumer base, a large investor base where everybody's in alignment, everybody's working together for a common goal, and then you have a lot of resources at their back, that's how you win economic wars. I went to go see Ant-Man this week. Jonathan Majors was in this movie. He did a wonderful job. Again, he did that really weirdly feminine cover on the cover of Ebony. I had to say something about that. I don't like the black man being presented that way. However, as an actor, he was superb. And as I was watching this movie, when it got done, we watched. My wife. I'm a fan of the Marvel movies. I like them all. I think they're good. And at the end, you watch all the credits because there's always like these bonus scenes at the end of the movie. And I was sitting there watching the credits, and I'm always fascinated because here in the credits, you see thousands of names, thousands and thousands of names, and I'm always so astonished by the fact that they got thousands and thousands and thousands of highly skilled, hardworking people to all come together for one common objective. And literally every time I see it, my first thought is like, how in the hell did you do that? Because I've seen scenarios where you can get 5 people on the same page to do one project or 10 people on the same page, let alone 10,000 people all working toward the same goal. That requires a type of thinking. That requires a commitment to organizational structure, hierarchies, codes of behavior, codes of conduct, gang affiliation. That's how you run a gang. That's how you run a group. That's how you run an army. Everybody knows their role. How you run a football team. If the coach sees one player doing his own thing and not following the protocol and the procedures, what does he do? He puts that player off the team because the team is always bigger than you. So the question that I would ask you, here's what I ask you. This is a good warm-up actually for the Black Wealth Bootcamp. If you want to come hang out with us in Los Angeles next week, is who's your team? Who's your gang? Who's your clique? What are your rules? What's your code of conduct? The book I just wrote, The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power, that's what it's all about. It's about gang affiliation. It's about the ability to win economic wars because you've got a gang. And when you learn how to think that way, then you start seeing wealth in places that others don't see it. For example, a lot of y'all make fun of people that might get married and have a whole bunch of kids. And you say, why would you have a whole bunch of kids? That's a whole lot of mouths to feed. It costs $300,000 just to raise one kid to 18. If you got 10 kids, that's a $3 million deficit. That's a $3 million bill, an invoice that you're going to have to pay over the next 18 years. Why would some people think, well, why would you do that? Well, have you ever been in a high school where there was like a kid that had like 8 siblings, like that all went to the same damn school? Does that kid ever get bullied? Give me a yes or no. Does the kid that's got 8 brothers and sisters at the same school, does anybody mess with that kid ever? Can a bully get away with like beating that kid up and taking their lunch money? No, they can't. They can't. There's no kid ever that's had 8 siblings or 7 siblings or 5 siblings at the same school who ever got bullied ever in life that I can think of, because you got a whole posse behind your back. And if you watch a show like you watch a show like Yellowstone, right? And watch how some of these white guys kind of roam. What do? They roll with the posse. They're on horseback, and it's like 9 guys, and they all got shotguns on their back, and they're making a point. I have a posse. I have a group of people, right? So my point is to say that that when you're talking about your economic game plan, you're talking about winning wars. Figure out who your posse is going to be. Get gang affiliated. So if you meet a great woman and you want to have kids, think about how many kids you want to have, how you're going to raise those kids. You train them early, on the code of conduct. You're loyal to the family. Everybody gets educated. Everybody works hard. We have the same values. Then boom, guess what? When they're 25 years old, they're all working together and they're building a great business together. Victory Boyd, her father, John, it's his birthday, by the way. Happy birthday, John, if you see this. John Boyd has 9 children, and they all perform together. And Victory, you saw her, you maybe saw her, she performed, the whole family performed. The group's called Infinity Song. They performed at the All Black National Convention. Victory's such a great singer. She sang for Jay-Z one time, and Jay-Z signed her to Rock Nation on the spot. That's how great of a singer she is. And her sisters are just as talented as her. But they have this whole group of kids that are all super talented, well-trained, work together as a unit, and they're succeeding as a family. It's a beautiful thing to watch. So what I'm saying is I would like to see what the Boyd family is doing in their family business. I'd like to see that happen all over the Black community. Right? So if you're having kids, then don't just think of having a child as like this unnecessary struggle and burden. That can be part of your investment portfolio. You can ethically say, we're going to make investments for our family legacy by having lots of kids, raising them well, taking good care of them so that when we get older, number one, we'll never want for anything. But then number two, they'll have a nice posse. They'll have protection. They'll have economic strength and other forms of strength because they've got so many people backing them up. Okay. And if you don't have that, let's say you're not going to have kids anymore, or you don't have any children, or you're not married, or whatever. Well, then you get into spaces with other people who think like you and just build yourself a family. There's so many lost souls out here in terms of people that feel alone. I get it. I know what it feels like. I felt that way for a big chunk of my life. Maybe that's part of the reason. Part of the reason I even connected with you guys and started doing stuff publicly is because, the way I talk, I didn't have a lot of friends and family that really understood what I was saying. They didn't get it. They thought I was too crazy and radical and whatever. Why are you trying to be this pro-Black stuff? You know that ain't gonna work because Black people don't care nothing about economics. That's the stuff I used to hear when I first started, writing financial books and talking about financial topics. I literally was told Black people don't care about investing. Like, you need to spread your wings. You're selling yourself short. You should talk to white people too, because white people have the money and they're willing to invest it. So it was a gamble. But what was great was that by screaming and yelling my voice out, I found like millions of you that see what I'm seeing, that get what I'm saying. Even if you don't agree, you understand where I'm coming from. So there are people out there like you. So I would encourage you to find places, like consciously invest in being in spaces where you can find other people to connect to, not just in terms of dating and marriage and hookups and all that. That's part of it. That actually is part of it. But just friendships and investing relationships and business relationships where you don't have to explain or convince somebody to become pro-Black when they were never even raised that way. Or you're not trying to take somebody who's not trained to be a builder and trying to convince them to want to build something. That's really stressful. That really will drain you, right? So that's one of the things that I see. And when Dr. Anderson is talking about all these different economic unions, all I'm seeing are gangs. Apple Computer to me is a gang. It's just a bunch of people that all operate by the same code of conduct, that have a common objective, and it's a $3 trillion gang. Amazon is a gang. McDonald's is a gang. All these economic gangs are all around you, and they're making tons of money. And then you think about this, right? The reason that you get stuck on the corporate plantation a lot of times is because you don't have a gang. You got to join a gang just to survive. Imagine you live in a neighborhood where you got the Crips over here, the Bloods over here, the Gangster Disciples over here, MS-13 over there, whatever. You got all these gangs. Well, some people join gangs just for safety, out of fear. Like, I got to do something to protect myself, right? So ultimately in this economy, you join the corporate plantation for the same reason that a little kid joins a gang just to feel safe. Right. So what I would just really want is I want you to have your own gang. I want you to have a group that you belong to so that you're not kind of this orphan sort of being kicked around and disrespected. Right. You can say, you know what, my family, that's my economic gang. That's my clique. That's my group. That's my collective. This is who I roll with. In my space, for example, you guys are part of my economic gang. I never have there's no city I go to in America where I know there isn't some Black person somewhere nearby that would have my back if I needed them. When I was at the Daytona 500, I told this story on my Instagram. My Instagram is real Boyce Watkins, by the way, if you want to follow. I was in a real bad situation. I had left my bag all the way back. And my friends were so mad at me because we were trying to rush to get out of the traffic. And I realized I left my bag and I had to go back a mile to get my bag. So I'm trying to run back with this big, heavy bag on my back. And it was really difficult. And I heard, and out of the blue, like, it's like God just saw what I was going through because I didn't even know how to get back to the car. So I had a long way to go and I didn't know which way to go. And I was feeling really stressed. And I heard, hey, Dr. Boyce. And the guy, there was a brother driving a golf cart. He was like the security guy. And he was like part of like this, right? He knew me like for whatever. So I was like, hey, what's going on, man? Can I get a ride? And he gave me a ride. He took me back to my car. And so ultimately, when you have friends, and people that are in unison with you, it just makes life so much easier. And also, so that means investing in the act of actively seeking out people like that you can connect to. And then also treating them as well as you can and showing the group that you are an asset. Like if I'm on a basketball team or football team and I want them to make me part of the team, I'm going to do everything I can to show them that I know how to play. I'm going to do everything I can to show them that I can score points for the team. Everybody wants to play with a teammate that knows how to win, that gets along with the other team members. So teach that to your children too. Some of this arrogance that you see like in media and hip hop and everything else, where rappers are like, I'm the greatest, I'm the baddest, I'm the biggest, I'm the strongest, I'm better than you, I'm better, I got more money than you. That type of nonsense does not work in a collective environment. That me mindset. Some of your black leaders have that problem. Some of your black leaders have egos so big that they can't even fit inside of a damn building, right? Because they are so hell-bent on trying to be the king of everything and the boss of everybody that they don't know how to collaborate. That's why Umar Johnson's school still ain't built, because Umar is not a collaborative individual. I'm not saying that this is not shots fired. This is something I've actually said, and I don't bring it up much. But if you ever want to know why the school didn't get built, it's because Umar thinks he's the alpha and the omega of everything and everyone and everybody all the time, and doesn't collaborate, doesn't take advice, doesn't work with people, doesn't do any of that. And if he had a collaborative mindset, that school would have been built back in 2013. You may have not even know about the school, but that's one of the things, that's one of the running jokes, right? So ultimately what I would say to you is teach your kids humility, teach them that there are scenarios where they must go into where the group is more important than they are. You cannot be part of a group where you think you are more important than the group. You can't do that. So ultimately, even when you see me do stuff, I'm very, very quick to make sure I give complete credit to Dr. Claude Anderson, what he did. Or if I see other people doing great things, I want to support what they're doing. Hey, good. I hope you're doing well. Part of that is for survival, because when you're doing right by other people, then they want to do right by you. So find your group, find your clique. That's going to make you successful. And maybe I shouldn't have said that thing about Umar School, but I don't care. I have to tell you guys the truth. I don't really care what anybody else thinks. All right, so let me keep going here. Let me keep reading. I'm gonna finish reading. We're on page 153 of Powernomics. You can get a copy of this book at powernomics.com. Dr. Claude Anderson is the author of this book. He's one of the smartest, most important human beings on this earth. And during Black History Month, which is now over, but it doesn't matter. Black History Month ends when we say that it ends, so it ain't over yet. Dr. Anderson is one of those guys that every child needs to know about. And white people are not going to teach anybody about Dr. Claude Anderson. It's up to us, and it's okay. We shouldn't be mad at white people for not teaching about Dr. Claude Anderson. If I was white, I wouldn't be teaching about him either, because there's no way white supremacy benefits by black people knowing who this guy is or implementing his ideas. Now, someone says that Umar School is built. I hope it's built. I really do. I really hope. I'm cheering for it. I'd love to see 1,000 kids enrolled in school and see them function and all that. Maybe that's already happening. So don't think that I'm saying that it can never be built. Maybe people grow, maybe people evolve. I just don't think, I just see scenarios where opportunities get missed because we have a lot of dysfunction that doesn't really get addressed. And that dysfunction creates toxicity that makes it difficult for us to collaborate as a collective and to come together. All right, so let me keep going here. All right, so let's see here. The low productivity in Black nations is traceable to major part to the fact that all major population groups have economic alliances. I already said that. It is important to restate that Black America must play the lead role in shaping and developing economic alliances, especially in African countries. It will not work in reverse. Afrocentrism would be a more useful concept if it came to mean Afro-American centric. Blacks in sub-Saharan Africa, Brazil, and the Caribbean are not only too politically and economically depressed and unstable, but major democracies will not enable them to become independent enough to compete. Okay, so I think what he's saying, and I don't want this to sound like he's disrespecting people in those other countries, because I actually think they have some things that you can learn from that can help you evolve as well. So I don't think it's a matter of putting anybody beneath us, but I will agree that one of the benefits of being in the United States is, as much as we do have real oppression that does exist, a lot of the oppression is optional. It's not like you're forced to send your child to a public school. It's not like you're forced to be on the corporate plantation. It's not like you're forced to consume the toxic media. We're just indoctrinated early to voluntarily do it. Or it's not like you're forced to eat unhealthy fast food in your neighborhood, but they might put you in a food desert and put you in a situation where all you can do is go to Popeye's chicken, right? But if you have the knowledge of knowing how to get out of that and the desire to get out of that and the discipline to get out of that, you can, right? So what he's basically saying is that we have types of freedom that some countries do not have. We have some upward mobility that some countries don't have. You look around, you see all kinds of Black lawyers, doctors, judges, business executives. Black people, when we're on our game, we end up killing it. And so what I really would hope is in the next generation that great Black people aren't just Black people that have great jobs. Great Black people become Black people who own great institutions, right? Who run great entities, who have great amounts of wealth and great amounts of power and independent power. That's how you really actually move a community forward. All right. So on the bottom of page 153 of Powernomics, powernomics.com, he says Black Americans can use the empowerment tools of Powernomics to develop a game plan to bring all the other Black nations around the world into an economic alliance that would allow them to compete worldwide. The conclusion is that the cycle of wealth begins with the control of natural resources. The cycle is now in the information stage. The 12 action steps presented in this chapter reflect the new orientation of practicing group economics and should give Blacks new ideas about how to benefit from the cycle of wealth and take control of their economic future. Other groups use our neighborhoods and population as resources to enrich themselves. If others can become rich off of us, we must think out of the box and redirect our resources to our benefit. This chapter provided guidance to communities, organizations, and individuals who wish to work toward fulfilling the vision of a self-sufficient and competitive Black America. All right, so next week we're going to jump to chapter 6. Chapter 6 is called Industrialization Using Your Paradigms. Why is industrialization important? Industrialization is one of those keys to scaling up your very best ideas. Industrialists have a certain mindset where they don't just do one thing really well. They do that same thing over and over and over again and scale it up, right? So remember, and this is how you win wars. The reason the United States won World War II was not because we had the best planes or the best guns or the best tanks. It's because we could make so many of them. You had people like Henry Ford that had assembly lines where they could take a tank and mass produce 1,000 tanks or 1,000 ships or 1,000 planes. The Germans had the best engineering. The Germans had the first jet airplanes. The Germans, Werner von Braun, who was a Nazi, actually, it's the reason NASA was finally able to get to the moon. So they had the best rocket ships. They had what else? They had the best tanks, the best submarines. They had all kinds of stuff, but they couldn't mass produce what they created, right? So what I'm saying to you, so what I'm engaged in with you all, and this is why I tell you, I don't teach any students. None of you are my students. I don't teach students. I teach teachers. All of you are teachers. Okay. So tell me right now, give me a yes if you understand that you are a teacher. You're not a student. You can be a student, but after you become a student, I need you to become a teacher. Why? Well, because we're scaling, we're multiplying, we're industrializing. I don't want to be, I don't want to have the best ideas that nobody's heard about. I don't want to be America's best kept secret. I mass market everything that I say, every idea that I have that I think can help a Black family. My goal is to mass market that idea because I know that if we're all implementing these ideas on a mass scale, we are becoming industrialists where we're mass producing. We're creating a factory of Black power, a Black power factory. That's what we're doing. A Black wealth factory, a Black education factory, right? A Black freedom factory. That's what I want. I don't care about me. And maybe I'm the originator of some of this, but I'm not important. I'm kind of like the prototype, maybe. But my dream is not to have one Boyce Watkins who's like winning on top of everything. No, I want to see like a million like people that are thinking that are elevating their thinking because of something that maybe I said or somebody in this group said. Do you understand? Right? Because I'm gonna die at some point, right? So to some extent, as much as it might seem like I know some of you thank me, you'll say, thank you, Dr. Boyce. I appreciate what you're doing. And I appreciate you appreciating me. But to be honest with you, I'm a little selfish. I ain't gonna lie, I'm a little selfish. I'm selfish because I want to live forever. I want to be immortal. I want to be able to die tomorrow and know that for the next 100 years There will be people repeating the ideas that we shared in this space. Why? Well, because I want the ideas to be so powerful, so impactful, so easily implemented, and so persuasive for you and your family that you're teaching this to your kids, that you're training your family, and next thing you know, go up a couple of generations. Boyce Watkins type ideas, and I don't even need the credit. I don't even need them to put my name on it, but I know my ideas when I see them, right? And I want to see Boyce Watkins ideas to just be so pervasive that nobody even knows where it originated from. And truth be told, we're already getting that done. We've already got it done. We're doing it. You go look at the Breakfast Club and look at how many people go on the Breakfast Club and talk about things that you and I have been talking about in this space for 15 years. Go look at some of these platforms online that talk about generational wealth. Look at some of the celebrities in Hollywood that are talking about Black wealth ideas that they weren't really expressing over a decade ago. And again, I don't want to be I don't want to take too much credit for things, and the credit isn't really the issue. I'm not trying to do that, but when I get on the phone, with people like Kanye and Ice Cube, and they're tweeting powernomics concepts, or Charlemagne the God and Tiffany Haddish got on an airplane specifically so they could go see Dr. Claude Anderson. What does that mean? That means that our ideas are getting out there. They're getting as high as the White House. And here's the thing. You ain't seen nothing yet. You ain't seen nothing yet. This is an easy sale. This is an easy sale because freedom, you don't have to convince people to want to be free. Freedom sells itself. Intelligence sells itself. Wealth and power sells itself. So the goal when I wrote this book, The 10 Commandments of Black Economic Power, was I said, how can I create 10 simple rules and strategies that can be easily implemented that will lead to a nuclear level, I'm talking about nuclear bomb level transformation and wealth possibilities for Black families all across this country. That's what I was doing here. That's what I did. And so we're already doing it, but this is the beginning. This is the infancy of all this. Just wait till 25 years down the line when you start seeing these billion-dollar companies and maybe trillion-dollar companies emerging, where they look back at 2022, 2018, 2016, and they realize that these children were born in one of the greatest Black economic movements in the history of this earth, right? That's what we're doing. So I need you to understand the significance of this moment. Maybe I don't know, maybe I'm being delusional. I don't think I am. I really think that we've done something. And it's not just me, it's all of you, every one of you that's talking to other people, talking to your kids, sharing these ideas, internalizing this, applying these things. I think together we are changing the world. So I want to encourage you to keep on going. Don't worry about the idiots. Don't worry about the losers. Don't worry about the bums. Don't worry about the naysayers. That's all part of the process, because everybody pays attention to the people that are winning. We are winning. Our families are winning. This segment of our community is not just winning at a level where we're going to survive. Our children are going to thrive. We will pass Asians. We will pass the Jewish community. We will pass the white community. Your kids are going to kill it. But all I need you to do is make sure you make a plan, stick to the plan, stay consistent, and have faith. You will succeed. Your family will have that legacy that you deserve. So hang in there, everybody. God bless you. Thank you all for listening. I'm going to head on out. By the way, if you want to take a look at the $5 a day plan, you can go to boycewatkins.com. Also, I'll be in LA March 10th for the first stage of the Black Wealth Bootcamp. If you'd like to join us live, then just feel free to come on out to LA. The information is at boycewatkins.com, as well as the book. Dr. Claude Anderson's book, Powernomics, can be purchased at powernomics.com. He has a whole library pack. I talked to Dr. Anderson. He sends his regards to you. He says he'd love to come to class, but he's, health. He's almost 90 now, so it's a little bit tough. But he still loves you, and he wanted me to tell you that how much he appreciates you. All right, so have a good night, everybody. God bless you, and thank you for listening, and I will see you all very soon. I'm going to go hang out with my wife for a little bit. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.